Okay, welcome back. In the previous lecture, we looked at the net present value as a way of appraising an investment proposal. Now, the net present value is not the only way to evaluate an investment proposal. There's also another method called the internal rate of return. So, an alternative approach to compare is to compare the expected return for different proposals. The internal rate of return, IRR, is the interest rate per period and investment yields when we set the net present value equal to 0. So if the internal rate of return is greater than the alternative interest rate, then we accept the project, and if the internal rate of return is less than the interest rate, then we reject this investment option. So if we go back to example 22, for example 22, we calculated the net present value, and for the net present value, we got negative 697. Okay, so our conclusion was that we would rather invest our money at an interest rate of 15% than to accept this investment option. So now we're going to redo this example, but we are going to make use of the internal rate of return method. So here we have the same time diagram that indicates the outflows and inflows for a project, and we want to determine the internal rate of return of the project, assuming an alternative investment option could yield an interest rate of 15% per period. So to find the internal rate of return, we now set our net present value equal to 0. Okay, so we start by setting our net present value equal to 0. Okay, so that's my negative 10,000, my outflow of 10,000. Now I want to move this outflow of 2,000, I want to move it back one time period. And instead of having the 15% here for my interest rate, I have my internal rate of return. I don't know what it is yet. Because I move it back one time period, it is to the -1. Then I have an inflow of 5,000 rands. And I move it back 2 time periods. Then an outflow, a further outflow of 2,000 rands. But I move back 3 time periods. And lastly, an inflow of 15,000 rands. Okay, so now we don't want to solve for the net present value. We have set the net present value equal to 0. We want to solve for the internal rate of return. Now we can't solve this by hand. We can only make use of a financial calculator. And you will see that in your notes, you have the steps that you follow to find the internal rate of return. It's very similar to the steps we follow to find the net present value. So if you follow these steps, you should be able to get your internal rate of return of 12.88%. Now, because my internal rate of return is 12.88%, which is less than the alternative of 15%, I will reject this investment project. And that is exactly the same conclusion that we came to when we did example 22, and we used the net present value method to evaluate this investment project. Okay, so now you can go to the exercises at the end of chapter 1, and you should be able to do the last few exercises at the end of chapter 1 That would be the exercises on section 1.10 to 1.12, and you should be able to do the exercises 5 up until the last one, number 9.